So today we're going to be talking about violence, and because of this I am kind of worried that this video is going to get completely demonetized. So if you do really enjoy this content, there is a PayPal link in the description, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I will update the video title if it gets demonetized. So there's a lot of talk about violence recently and what causes it and how we can prevent it. Because violence, I think, is one of the biggest things people are scared of all over the world. Now, some cultures and countries, they embrace it a lot more than others do. And to a very large extent, so does the country I live in. I live in America, and violence is not something we really shy away from, especially in terms of our media and entertainment. But does our media and entertainment cause violence? Well, no, of course not. What I find really funny about this is just all the ways I can attack it. And because I can attack it from so many different ways, and it's kind of fun to do so, this video won't be structured very well. I mean, none of my videos are structured very well, but this one especially will just kind of be off the cuff. Because the first thing I want to mention is guns versus video games. Now, I am all for sane, responsible, law-abiding people owning firearms if they want to. There's lots of people out there that blame guns for violence, and there are lots of people out there that blame video games and media for violence. Now, this is what I find funny, is that the people that dismiss the idea that guns cause violence, saying that guns don't kill people, you know, bad people kill people with guns, and this is a broad generalization because, broad strokes paint the fence faster, but there are people out there that dismiss the idea that it's a problem with guns, but then they're eager to blame video games. That it's not the guns, it's the video games. You can't be offended when somebody blames inanimate objects like firearms for violence, and then blame interactive and passive media for the same violence. You can't say, oh, guns aren't the problem. Guns aren't the problem. Gun control won't solve anything. It's the video games. That's the same argument with a different inanimate object. Video games require suspension of disbelief. Video games are quite close to imaginative play. Of course it's interactive, of course a lot of it's realistic now and very visceral, but obviously realism and the amount of visceralness in the games, I don't think that's a word, doesn't matter because, like, even back in the day when video games looked like hammered shit and were not realistic at all, they were being blamed for violence years ago. It was either rotting your brain cells or giving you dark thoughts. It was one or the other. My problem isn't with guns or video games, my problem is with the people that say it's not guns, it's video games, or it's not video games, it's guns. It's a very complex issue. Violence and killing is not something you can account for with laws. All you can do is take steps to prevent it and soften the blow. And unfortunately, when it comes to guns, there's millions of them everywhere, and criminals don't care about the legal ways to obtain them. And maybe I'm wrong, but I honestly don't think you can account for crazy. That's why we call it crazy. And here's the thing, video games are played by crazy people. Just like video games are played by murderers. Video games are played by racists and sexual abusers. Video games are played by assholes and nice people alike. Video games are just a thing you do. Okay? So yes, a violent person who committed an atrocity with a firearm or a machete, just because they also owned a game that had firearms and machetes in it, that doesn't mean anything. And also, if you look at most of the stories of mass shootings, it's always like, oh, the person had unfiltered access to video games and other forms of violent media, a firearm, and prescription drugs. But of course, it goes without saying that violence has existed before video games. Things and times were way more violent before video games. And a lot of gamers open their stupid mouths and they're like, well, video games reduce crime because it allows people to vent out their frustrations. No! Okay, maybe you, but do not speak on behalf of gamers when saying shit like, oh, well actually, video games help relieve stress, which would decrease the amount of violent crimes. No, 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 no. Sane people are not playing Call of Duty to resist the urge to murder. I don't play Rainbow Six Siege because, oh man, in real life I can't hunker down in a well-fortified room with a shotgun and wait for a faggot to come around the corner so I can blow their brains out. No, that's not why I play Rainbow Six. Do not generalize me. If you are honestly playing violent video games to vent out violent feelings, that's you, man. Do not put me in that bubble. I'm not saying I don't get angry. I'm not saying I don't have outbursts. I'm not saying I could get better at it. But I don't load up Doom to deal with my aggressive feelings. No. In fact, here's what I personally do. When I'm feeling extra irritable or frustrated or kind of like I want to rip somebody's throat out, we all have those days where somebody's like, hey, and you're like, you motherfucker, how dare you fucking say hi to me. Those days, I watch charming shows on Netflix. I watch YouTubers I find to be funny. I rewatch things like old childhood movies. I'll watch like Toy Story or something and just kind of bring myself back to kind of feeling a little bit warmer. And honestly, it's just really funny. It's like, yeah, video games don't cause us violence.
Video games are the only things keeping me from being violent.
No. And also, on top of all this nonsense, stop with the video games don't make people angry or violent. Lag does. No. Stop that. Nothing makes you violent. You are either violent or you're not violent. A non-violent person is not going to sit and play Call of Duty until he wants to shoot his classmates. Fuck off. So let's recap a little bit here. Violence has always existed. Violence has gone down in recent years. I don't think it's a direct correlation to video games. I just think things in our world are much more comfortable than they used to be. You know, maybe it's because there isn't a draft going on. You know, that usually calms people's nerves a bit. You can't get mad when people blame guns and then blame video games and movies. And you can't blame guns and be like, no, what we take in doesn't matter. You know, what we watch and view doesn't matter. Because here's a little twist of this. I do think it does matter a little bit. And maybe this sounds like I'm flip-flopping, but I'm really not here. I think when people are very young or very, very impressionable, I'm talking about the very early years, if they play a lot of violent video games, and this has just been my experience, the kids I know that play a lot of violent games at a young age, they do act a little creepy. They do act a little violent. And I'm gonna assume most of them grow out of it, and I've seen a couple kids grow out of it over my years of knowing kids, whether I was their age at the time or I've kind of watched them grow up from a distance. And like, sometimes they grow out of it, but some of them it's like, this resonates with you. During the early developmental part of your brain where you need to be socialized and you need to have a wide array of experiences, if you're being sat in front of violent movies because no one cares what the hell you watch, or you're watching people get shot, or you're playing Call of Duty and just shooting people with guns, you might become desensitized to it without realizing it. I'm not going to put that out of the question. To put that completely out of the question that, oh, it just doesn't affect us at all. It keeps us chill, man. That's like the weed argument. Oh, it doesn't do anything wrong to me. It just helps me chill. No, it is affecting your brain. The things in our life affect our brains. Okay? Here's an idea. If something impacts you and makes you feel a certain way, it is messing with your brain. Be careful of everything. I don't mean be paranoid of everything, I just mean be careful. Everything in moderation, especially when you're young and impressionable. Kids, they might seem cuddly and cute, but that's mostly probably because they're in a warmer household. You take them out of a warmer household, and suddenly they act cold, dark, and angry with the world. And it's true. They don't have a moral compass yet. So, you know, maybe form one before you put them in front of a lot of violence. Now, when I was a kid, I played games with guns and shooting. As cartoony as it was, there was shooting and killing, and I watched a lot of, you know, cartoons of people fighting and hitting each other and kicking each other's asses, and I think a lot of kids did. But my parents mostly wanted me to focus on imaginative play other than, like, you know, just like media consumption, which maybe that was good for me in the long run. Maybe it damaged me deeply. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on any of this. Take most of what I'm saying with a grain of salt, even though I think I'm pretty right on some of these things. I'm not going to lie. But I'm going to stop throwing underhanded compliments to myself and talk about the imaginative play that I had. You see, I used to play with my friends with toy guns all the time. Whether it was an unloaded airsoft gun, a Nerf gun, just one of those weird plastic guns that go but that's all they do. Or, you know, we used sticks that looked like guns, or they whittled sticks that looked like guns. No matter what, there was some sort of gun or sword involved in most of my playtime. And, you know, you talk about video games causing violence. but I would see a couple of Roy Rogers cowboy movies, and I'd take my 6-shooter revolver cap gun and shoot at my friends, and they would pretend to get shot and die and fall over and scream, "Rah, I'm dying," you know? And it's like, I'm imagining that I'm shooting you with something I'm actually holding in my hand that resembles a gun. Like, if we're gonna blame video games, why not blame violent play? Like, just keep going on. Because, like, the thing is you watch a kid play Grand Theft Auto 5 and he starts killing civilians, it's like, it's not real. It's not real. It might say something about your kid, and you could probably get something out of a therapist that actually understands this shit. Or as just a psychologist, I should say. But who knows, maybe the kid's pretending that all the people are bad guys, or they're zombies, or they're infected, or maybe he's pretending that they're bullies, or I don't know. Like, it's imagined, it doesn't matter. It's not real. Just like when he pretends to shoot his friends in the backyard with a Nerf gun and they pretend to die and bleed out, that's not real either. And why do people seriously bring up Grand Theft Auto 5 when talking about violence? Even Grand Theft Auto 5, if you keep killing people, it constantly sends police after you. It constantly will send police after you and kick the shit out of you for being an asshole. Like, yeah, and you can kill the cops. It's a sandbox game, you can do anything. But they'll eventually kill you. They'll eventually wear you down. You know, because most kids that play the game don't have battle tanks and jets and armor and an army of friends that are helping them, you know, fight off the police. But either way, it becomes like this altercation, so you're not just a mass murderer. And GTA does that for a very specific reason, we'll say that. Because they don't want their game to look like Civilian Murder Simulator. Now, one more thing here, I think video games are what we see in movies, but interactable. I've always kind of thought that, even before they were like extra cinematic and had the slow-mo shots and did all the things we are now used to from like Call of Duty campaigns, it was like you could kind of experience the stuff you saw in movies. You could experience World War II, you could experience being a spy, you could experience being a fucking kung fu master. You can experience that, and you can kind of apply like your own agency to something you would otherwise passively take in. And oh my god, how many of our favorite TV and movie heroes kill people all the time? Like, I don't know why this one comes to my mind. I haven't even watched the show in years, but like Jack Bauer from 24 kills people. Luke Skywalker has killed before. Staying on Star Wars, Han Solo has shot people. And if we just want to focus on general killing, like Link kills tons of people, you know? And even in Kingdom Hearts, that's kind of a charming game, kind of a sweet JRPG in a lot of ways, with Disney characters, and I'm still bashing the shit out of monsters with a, you know, key-shaped sword, you know, basically. America and places like it have tons of stories. I think almost every culture has stories of heroes that killed in the name of good. They killed other warriors, they killed monsters, they slaughtered things, and most games out there, I'm gonna say most games and most TV shows and most movies contain heroes that have to kill either monsters or people for good. Again, I'm not saying there aren't video games where you play as a bad guy, and there aren't video games that allow you to be an asshole, there aren't movies where you kind of follow the life of an asshole, follow the life of a villainy character. I'm not saying those don't exist, but most of our entertainment comes from people fighting for good, for freedom, for justice, and that's going to be a part of a lot of cultures for a long time. So yeah, there's killing in video games, but whether I'm competing against other real people in what is glorified long-distance laser tag, or I'm fighting scripted programmed enemies that are set to return fire and take it just as well, it doesn't matter. You see, depictions of violence do not cause it. They exist because of the inherent value of violence. If an evil man came up to you and your wife or you and your husband and tried to shoot you in the head, and you took the gun out of his hand and beat the shit out of his face with the butt end of the pistol, I'm not getting monetized. If you did that, that's violent. But one would argue, and most would argue, that's violence in the name of good. And people have killed to defend their countries, their families, their ideals, and fought and died so that you can have your way of life that you're living right now that allows you to watch this video. And a lot of those courageous people were maybe inspired by stories. of Spider-Man kicking bad guys' asses, or Frank Castle taking manners into his own hands. Maybe it's Jack Bauer joining an organization to fight terrorism. Or maybe it's because Mario steps on turtles' heads to save the love of his life. I don't know. But what, you're gonna blame the bad violence on video games or guns? But what about the good violence? Because I'm sorry, there is such a thing as good violence, and there is such a thing as bad people. Sometimes bad people are taken out by good violence, and I stand by that. Anyway, see when I see it, and I don't mean punch people that have different political or social views than you. Don't start punching people because you disagree with them. That's bad violence, and that opens up a dangerous precedent. And a lot of what I said here is, you know, you could probably poke some holes in it, and I'd be up for some discussion as long as it's civil. And yeah, I'll see when I see you. Goodbye. It's funny, as I'm recording this, I look over, and I have my Lego Luke Skywalker holding a blaster, shooting at some stormtroopers, a little diorama I set up. Huh. I think stormtroopers should die. They're kind of like space Nazis. Not like real Nazis, not Nazis with Nazi haircuts, like Nazis. The space Nazis. Stormtroopers are basically space Nazis.